In this lesson, we will learn about the Layers panel and the Appearances panel. If you'd like to follow along, please open the Layers and Appearances Illustrator file from the Chapter 2 subfolder of your Project Files folder located on your desktop. When you open this file, you may get a warning about a missing font, Code Pro Demo. For this lesson, it's fine if the font is substituted, so go ahead and click Open if you see that font warning dialog box. Let's take a look at our logo. Big City Pet Sitters. We have two artboards, one over to the left and another concept for our logo over on the artboard to the right. Let's make sure that we all see the same thing and that we're in the same workspace. Let's go to the Window menu. Let's go to Workspace. Let's all be sure that we are in the Essentials workspace, and then let's reset our Essentials workspace. When we do that, we're going to notice a lot of little icons over to the right. What we need to do is open the Appearances panel and the Layers panel. The Appearances panel is right here toward the bottom, so I'm going to click one time and separate this guy from the group, and we'll just close the graphic styles for now, and we'll do that for the Layers also. Click here and move the Layers panel out, and then let's close the artboards behind there. Alright, so let's talk about the Layers panel first. Every object on your workspace has a place in the Layers panel, has its very own layer. Right here we see that we have a generic layer 1 with a little twisty beside it. If you click the little twisty and you can actually stretch your Layers panel open a little bit, you're going to see that everything on Artboard 1 and Artboard 2 are in the Layers panel. Everything is right here together. Over on the left, notice that when we select our objects, you can tell exactly where your object is in the Layers panel because there's a little indicator, a little blue box that lets you know exactly where your selected object is. Let's see that again. Let's click over here on the red object, and Illustrator says, oh, here I am. Now the reason that you see blue here and you see the blue layer color and the blue selection outline is because this layer color is blue. Okay, every layer has its very own unique color. Our generic 1 layer is blue. When we create another layer, that layer will be probably red, or we could assign a color to the layer to change it if we want to. Alright, well let's get started. As your Illustrator files grow larger, it's a good idea to keep things organized, right? Otherwise everything just gets all jumbled up and kind of confusing and hard to work with. Right now we just have layer 1. Why don't we start by renaming this layer? Now, what exactly is it that we want to do? Why don't we take everything that's over on Artboard 1 and create a layer for it, or actually leave it here in layer 1, but name this logo 1, and then everything that's on Artboard 2, let's actually put that in a new layer called logo 2. Alright, so let's do that. Let's rename layer 1, just double click and name this logo 1 and click enter. Alright, so everything is there so far. Now we need to create a new layer. We'll collapse this layer briefly and look down at the bottom of the Layers panel. There's two icons side by side. One allows you to create a new layer, and the one to the left of that creates a new sub-layer, kind of a layer within a layer. Right now we just need a new layer, so let's click here to create a new layer. Notice that the layer color is red, and let's name this one Logo 2 and hit enter. Alright, very good. Now what we need to do is move everything in Logo 2 to the correct layer, right? First of all, we could put Logo 1 on top of Logo 2 so it makes sense. Let's do that first. We could either move Logo 1 up or Logo 2 down. Let's move Logo 2 down. We'll click right here on the thumbnail icon and drop it underneath Logo 1. Alright? Notice that Logo 1 still has all of our objects there, and that's what we are going to work on now. What we want to do is actually get these elements into the Logo 2 layer. Probably the easiest way to do that is to move your objects around from the Layers panel. You may notice that we have a grouped object selected right here, our dog, and our goal is to move this grouped object down into Logo 2. Let's click right here on the thumbnail and drag it and drop it directly on top of Logo 2. The first thing you may notice is the selected outline becomes red and that reflects the color of this layer. All right, very good. So that's our first object in Logo 2. Now we need to bring the other ones in there as well. So let's follow the same steps. Let's select the object that we'd like to move, and then we can simply drag it by the thumbnail icon. Notice that the text Pet Sitters is selected. We can verify that here, and then we'll drag the thumbnail icon down into the proper layer, which is Logo 2. We won't worry about the stacking order. We're going to notice that some objects may be hiding other things, and that's because some objects are higher up in the stacking order than others. We'll fix that soon enough. Now, what if we wanted to use the Layers panel to select the text Big City right here? All right? Well, let's talk about that. First of all, let's notice that that text is white. So when we move it at first, we may not see it unless, of course, we move the red building that's behind it. Let's see what that means exactly. Well, if we were to turn the visibility off next to the red building here, this particular path, notice that the text looks like it disappears, and that's because the text is white. We'll turn this back on, so this little eyeball will temporarily turn on and off the visibility of any of your objects as you need to, so you can kind of see your way around. All right? Well, what if we decided that we wanted to use the Layers panel to select an object instead of selecting it on the workspace instead? Well, that's fine, but here's what you need to know. This little round thing over to the right, this little guy is called the target indicator. To actually select an object, you need to click on this little thing rather than on the layer itself or the thumbnail, okay? So what does that mean exactly? Well, I'll tell you, let's start off by dragging the red building down. It may be that you think, well, we'll just select the group of buildings here in the Layers panel, so we'll just click here and select the buildings to move them down. Well, if you want to be absolutely sure that what you intend to select is selected, you might want to just double check. For example, if we look over on the artwork, we'll see that Pet Sitters, the text Pet Sitters, is actually still selected. But look what happens if we click over here on the target indicator instead. Now we see for sure that the red buildings is selected, right? That path. Now let's take this path and let's move it down. All right, and now when it's dropped into Logo 2, the selection outline becomes red. Let's try that again with the text Big City. Let's select it with the target indicator, grab the thumbnail icon, and pull it down as well. And now what we have is this. We have all four of our objects, including our grouped object, that make up Artboard 2 in our Logo 2 layer. Very good. The only issue is that part of our graphic, our dog there, is covered up by the building. Well, that's because the stacking order matters. Whatever's on the top actually covers up what's underneath it if two objects overlap. That's why you see the red building on top of the dog. So here's what we'd need to do. We would need to pull the path for the red buildings down, or the group that make up the dog layer up. All right, so let's just select the dog layer right here. I'm going to go over just to be safe. I'll click the target indicator icon, and now we'll move this guy. We'll click right here on the thumbnail icon, and let's just drag it up in the stacking order until it gets right above the red buildings, and then let go. What you'll notice if you deselect is now our dog is where it needs to be, which is in front of the red buildings and not behind. Very nice. So, layers, a great way to organize your artwork. We do remember that stacking order is important. We also remember that if we want to select an object in the Layers panel, the best way to do that is to be sure that you select the target indicator icon here over to the right to absolutely select what you intend to select, not just the layer or the thumbnail. All right? We've learned to create layers, and we've learned that you can toggle the visibility of any object, any layer or layer group on and off simply by clicking the visibility icon. So if you'd like to toggle the visibility off for an entire layer, click on the very top layer. Otherwise, you can toggle the visibility off for each object by clicking beside the object. All right? One other thing that you can do that's very handy is you can lock an object in place. As you are building your Illustrator artwork, Things overlap. For example, we'll notice here that the dog is right over the buildings, which is next to the text. Well, if we continue to work on this illustration, there may be times where we accidentally move things out of place, or we kind of just get things out of order and we don't need to. Well, right beside the visibility column, you'll see another little gray column right here, right? If you click in this column beside any object, what you are going to see is a padlock appear. This locks the contents of that layer. So we just turned on the padlock next to the gray building over on the left artboard. So let's see what happens if we try to select that object here on the workspace. Indeed, we can't. So that can be very helpful, especially if we were going to be putting other objects on top of the gray building and we were accidentally moving that thing out of the way a lot. All right, well, let's talk about the Appearances panel. What is the Appearances panel? Well, the Appearances panel is very helpful because what it does is it allows you to see the appearances, meaning the stroke and the fill, perhaps any special effects, transparency settings, or whatever for every selected object. So let's see how that works. Let's go over here to the right and maybe select our red buildings. Now we'll open up the Appearances panel just a little bit, and what you're going to be able to see here is every single attribute that has been applied to that red building. We'll see that we have a stroke and a fill, and keep in mind that these guys are little twisties, and sometimes you'll see a lot of additional information about the selected object if you drill down. All right, every object has an opacity setting. That means it can be anything from completely transparent to 100% opaque. Not only that, notice that everything in the Appearances panel, like the stroke here, has an opacity setting. That means you can explicitly set the opacity setting for the stroke to be 100% transparent or completely opaque. You could do the same thing with the fill, and then right here, this opacity setting allows you to adjust the opacity of the entire selected object. Another great thing about the Appearances panel is it allows you to create multiple fills and multiple strokes if you need to. We just click right here on the flyout menu. We'll see that we could add a new fill or a new stroke if we needed to. We won't do that right now. You could use the flyout menu, or you might look down here and use these little icons in the lower left-hand corner as well. Well, that wraps it up for this lesson. In this lesson, you've learned to use two very important panels in Illustrator, the Layers panel and the Appearance panel. Using these panels effectively will ensure that your Illustrator files stay organized and will allow you to work efficiently and inspect and edit every individual object in your illustration.